It was meant to be a special moment for Rishi Sunak as he seeks to put the special back into the UK's strained relationship with the US. But the Prime Minister suffered an awkward moment as he greeted Joe Biden off Air Force One last night. In what some have suggested was a diplomatic snub, the US president was quick to shake off the attentions of the PM after landing in Belfast. After a swift greeting with the UK leader on the tarmac in blustery, chilly conditions, he moved away to salute the King's personal representative for County Antrim, Lord Lieutenant David McCorkle. He then appeared to be wrapped in a longer, much more friendly embrace with Jane Hartley, the glamorous US ambassador to the UK appointed by the president last year. Mr. Biden's team was forced to deny today that he was anti-British after the DUP slammed the president as extremely partisan after he trumpeted his Irish roots. The president was only expected to greet the leaders of the main Northern Ireland political parties before his speech, after which he immediately headed over the border to the Republic, where he will spend the next 3 days. Mr. Biden held one-to-one talks with Mr. Sunak this morning in a Belfast hotel. He faced a volley of questions from reporters, including whether he had a message for Northern Irish parties and why he was not discussing a trade deal while on his visit to the UK. But he failed to answer them. He told reporters he is here to listen during a trip to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Despite fledgling signs of a thaw in relations after the Windsor framework eased the row with the EU over post-Brexit rules in the province, US officials have suggested the leaders will not even talk about reviving a trade package. Amanda Sloat, Senior Director for Europe at the US National Security Council, told a briefing for journalists the focus will be Northern Ireland and the war in Ukraine. I don't anticipate that the two leaders are going to be talking about a free trade agreement on this trip. I think their conversation is going to focus primarily on the situation in Northern Ireland, given that that's where they're meeting, as well as the chance to touch base on Ukraine and some other issues, she said. Ms. Sloat flatly denied that Mr. Biden was anti-British, or on what amounted to a holiday to Ireland. I think the track record of the president shows that he's not anti-British, she said. The UK remains one of our strongest and closest allies, she said, and it's difficult, frankly, to think of an issue in the world that we are not closely cooperating with the British on, and it's why the president wanted to have the opportunity to engage with Prime Minister Sunak this morning to start his day here in Belfast. She said Mr. Biden and Mr. Sunak had the opportunity to touch briefly on economic issues when they met in San Diego, a conversation which she said will be furthered and deepened when they meet in Washington in June. We're continually looking for ways to engage with the UK on a whole range of economic issues, she added. Downing Street is believed to be focusing on smaller agreements with the US, such as one that has been mooted on minerals. but the U.S. administration said there will not be a formal group meeting with the leaders. The main message of the President to all parties, to all people of Northern Ireland, is to reaffirm support for the Good Friday Agreement, and obviously Pillar 1 and the devolved institutions here in Northern Ireland are a fundamental part of the Good Friday Agreement, and so I think the President's message, as he said on St. Patrick's Day and I expect he will reaffirm today, is the United States' strong support for that, the belief that the people of Northern Ireland deserve to have a democratically elected power-sharing representative governance, Ms. Sloat said. Mr. Biden is also not going to Stormont, with the power-sharing assembly established in the peace deal currently suspended amid a boycott by the DUP. The Unionist Party's Brexit spokesman Sammy Wilson said this morning that Mr. Biden had to take a share of responsibility for the political instability in Northern Ireland. He is seen as extremely partisan, Mr. Wilson told Talk TV, adding that Mr. Biden had shown himself anti-British in the debates over Brexit. I suppose this is more about Joe Biden, his re-election attempts and appealing to the Irish vote in America, Mr. Wilson said. The U.S. President, accompanied by his Northern Ireland envoy Joe Kennedy, will carry out several other engagements across the week to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which largely brought an end to the Troubles in Northern Ireland in 1998. He will meet the Prime Minister again on Wednesday for a bilateral meeting. Mr. Sunak will not attend Mr. Biden's keynote speech. Speaking to reporters before his departure, Mr. Biden said that his top priority was to make sure the Irish Accords and the Windsor Agreement stay in place, keep the peace. His son Hunter Biden and sister Valerie Biden Owen are accompanying him for the trip. There have been fears that a gaffe by the president during his visit could further alienate Unionists. As vice president, Mr. Biden caused massive offense to Northern Ireland's Unionist community when, during a St. Patrick's Day event, he joked, "If you're wearing orange, you're not welcome here." Northern Ireland's primarily Protestant Unionist community associate themselves with the colour in celebration of William of Orange's victory over Catholic forces at the Battle of the Boyne in 1690. As a senator in 1985, he spoke out against making it easier to extradite Irish Republican Army militants from the U.S. to Britain, a sentiment popular with Irish Americans but not in Britain. He has talked often about his mother's hatred for England, which was so intense that she once refused to use a bed that Queen Elizabeth II had slept in. In his memoir, Promises to Keep, he recalls with a degree of embarrassment at his English surname Biden. And he describes how his Irish-American aunt Gertie Finnegan once told him, "Your father is not a bad man. He's just English." In 2020, as president-elect, he took a cheeky dig at the UK's national broadcaster when a BBC reporter shouted a question at him. The BBC? He said, moving on with a smile. I am Irish. Mr. Biden will cross the border to attend engagements in County Louth this afternoon. The president has traced his ancestral roots to the area and he will tour Carlingford Castle in the county before spending the night in Dublin. He is then expected to visit Irish President Michael D. Higgins on Thursday. It has been announced that Dublin's Phoenix Park will be closed for 24 hours from 5 p.m. on Wednesday to facilitate the visit. Mr. Higgins' official residence is within the park's grounds. The White House said Mr. Biden will take part in a tree planting ceremony and ringing of the peace bell at the president's official residence, Áras and Uachtaráin. Following that ceremony, he will meet again with Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, whom Mr. Biden recently hosted for St. Patrick's Day. Mr. Biden will address the Irish Parliament and attend a banquet dinner at Dublin Castle tomorrow evening. The president's trip will conclude with a visit to County Mayo, where he has also connected with distant cousins, on Friday. He will tour the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Knock and visit the North Mayo Heritage and Genealogical Center's Family History Research Unit. He will then make a public speech at St. Murdagh's Cathedral in Ballina. Monday marked 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, which ended decades of violence in Northern Ireland and left 3,600 people dead. The president tweeted he would use the Belfast leg of his trip to underscore his nation's commitment to preserving peace and encouraging prosperity in the region. But he was cautioned against exerting too much pressure on Unionists by former Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair, one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. He told Radio 4 Today, "One thing I learned about the Unionists is if you try and pressurize them to do something that they're fundamentally in disagreement with, it's usually futile pressure, even if it comes from the US, so you've got to use that influence carefully." The UK is observing the milestone anniversary with a reunion of key players in the peace process alongside Biden's visit. Deep divisions remain over the conflict's legacy, and authorities raised the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland to severe in March as they warned of IRA dissidents opposed to the peace process. Youths threw petrol bombs and set a police vehicle on fire during a dissident march in Londonderry on Monday. Police said they had intelligence that a major attack had been planned, so when masked teenagers threw petrol bombs at a vehicle, they simply withdrew rather than being sucked into what they thought might be an ambush. The following day they said they had recovered 4 pipe bombs from a cemetery near the city. The discovery of these devices was a further sinister and worrying development, said Assistant Chief Constable Bobby Singleton.